Takže dobrý večer, dámy a pánové. Mé jméno je Štěpán Bertl. Chtěl bych vás přivítat v Centru architektury a městského plánování na další ze série přednášek s názvem Urban Talks, dnes s americkým krajinářským architektem a urbanistou Markem Johnsonem. For our English-speaking friends, welcome at CAMP, the Center for Architecture and Metropolitan Planning, for another lecture, part of our Urban Talks program today with Mark Johnson. Mark is an American architect from Denver originally, although he spends a lot of time in the Czech Republic recently because he's working on a project for the revitalization of the southern city center in Brno. It's a new project. I think today you'll be the first public to be seeing some of these ideas that he's brought forward. Among other important projects, Mark's worked on the revitalization of the Los Angeles River master plan, as well as the Stapleton Airport in Denver. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome you back to Prague, Mark. It's been a long time. It's nice to see you again, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is the volume okay? Okay, so if you like what I say, speak English. If you don't like, speak Czech. It's very simple. Then I won't know. If you want to interrupt me and ask a question while I'm talking, just wave your hand. And if I don't hear you, jump up and down. And if necessary, scream. But because I don't care. I am a professional talker. And so sometimes I talk too much. And if everybody stands up, then I'll stop. So, I like to have a lot of fun, and I have many things here. Some I might go fast, some I might go slow. I'm not overly rehearsed, but if you want to see what we're doing in Brno, then you have to wait till the end because it's the last thing. So it's just like putting the dessert after the dinner. So, cities are living systems. I put this here just for fun. This is my office, right next to Daniel Libeskind. And it was really fun with him coming to my office all the time. We have a co-work hub in this building. We have landscape architects. I am a landscape architect. Urban designers, architects, planners, sustainability engineer, civil engineer, architectural photographer, IT specialist, lighting designer, transportation specialist, public communications and relations company, all mixed in this building with open plan. We have 3 conference rooms, everybody shares everything, and so we call it our creative village. But I wanted to start with something a little personal because I'm learning in today's world, because I do work all over the world, that it's more and more important. Personality is becoming a more important part of getting things done in the world. And unfortunately, you know, right now in America, we have a personality called Donald Trump. And it's ridiculous, but it shows you what you can do with personality. And it's very important to understand that because the world is changing more and more because of social media and communication and personality and presentation, and less on substance. And I think it's very sad, but it's something we have to deal with. So a little bit about me. My grandparents came from this place. It's called Gravargili in Iceland, in a place called Undandarfjörður. Say that. Anybody want to say that? Undandarfjörður. And my grandfather's name was Laurits Jonsson. His father was Jon Wielensen, and his father was Wielander Hallgrimsson. And my grandmother's name was Wilfriður Þorkelsdóttir. But that's where I am from. Pretty remote place. And here I am. I went to live here in 1969 to get to know Icelandic and to get to know my roots. This farm has been in my family 650 years. And that where the trees are is the family cemetery because my great-great-grandparents were killed when the avalanche came off of that mountain called Tunga and wiped out the house. And so it became the family cemetery. And I'm only telling you this because, especially as an American, you learn to celebrate being American, but also the deep legacy of who you also really are. And that doesn't get talked about too much. I grew up in Chicago. In fact, my grandfather's factory is in a building right here. This is Clybourne Avenue. And this is what it was like when I was a kid. But I loved the power of buildings, these muscular buildings reaching to the sky, but I also love the power of these muscular trees reaching to the sky. And so I am a kid from nature and city together in one, and that's what my entire practice is about. Version 1 and version 2, this will happen to you also. Oh, it's version 3. Yeah, there's version 2 I try to forget. Our office has people with many, many origins, people from all over the place. We have people maybe from 7 different countries, and it's extremely important to have these different kinds of personal origins and different kinds of intelligence in what we do. We are a culture. And what that means is we are not driven by rules. We are driven by these personalities, very strong personalities. We position ourselves as thought leaders, and I believe we are. We require these multiple intelligences because in working in the city requires discovery. It requires analysis, but the clash of analysis leads to discovery, and discovery is where new knowledge is formed. It means that we have to be very fluid in how we work. So we're like, everybody's like juggling all the time. It's very important. But that means our process has to be reliable, and each one of us is accountable for ourselves. It's a very unusual design practice. And if you would get to know it more, you would find it's very different than most, which is why with only 25 people, we work all over the world. Now, cities have origins and culture too. And it's important to understand where a city has come from and why it operates. So in this Bruegel painting, you see the well and all the crazy people around the well. So the town is formed where there's a resource, water and fields for growing agriculture. It's very simple. And over time, that pattern starts to grow as labor divides and people have different specialties and so on. It's a very organic kind of city. But these patterns are not just old and in paintings. These patterns are very real. Here's Boston, which is about 400 years old. And Boston sits, you can see it at the top right here, there's the city, in this fabulous harbor with these beautiful islands. And originally, when the Pilgrims came, if you know what the Pilgrims were, the Pilgrims came here. This is Long Wharf, where the wharf goes farthest out into the water for the big ships coming from the old country. And this is the State House, so the center of politics for the new city. And this is Long Wharf. See, Long Wharf. Here's the State House. And this route between the center of merchants at the wharf and the center of power at the State House becomes the origin of the financial district. And so the financial district emerges between these two things because there's water and a hill. It's not just that simple. There's an ecological structure to this place which leads to how settlement occurs. So there's the State House, and you can see Long Wharf is here, the State House is here. This is the Boston Common, and as I always say, it's on the sunny side of the hill because pilgrims aren't stupid. They put the cows in the sun, not on the snowy side. And it's all defined by the ecological structure of that place. But the reason I'm telling you this is these patterns never change. So this is Long Wharf right there. And here is the State House. Look how it's changed. But these patterns do not change. And if you understand how a city grows, and so for example, there's the State House again. Here's the Common. Cities are about connectivity. In fact, cities are really just about transactions. We come to a city because we want a transaction. You and I are having a transaction right now. If you bought something at lunch, it's a transaction. If you go to see your friends, that's a transaction. And this crossing, this social intersection, is the reason that cities exist. So we have to understand where they come from and how they're projected into the future. So just to finish on this idea, here's the Boston Common, Commonwealth Avenue. I used to live right here. And this pattern does not change in 400 years. So you will never see this building built over here. And you will never see this little house built in there, right? Because the distribution of the uses in this connected infrastructure are entirely based on the ecology of place. So when you look at every city, you must think about that ecology. So that then was expanded by Olmsted into this beautiful system called the Fenway. And then over time, the city grows around that framework. So my point is that transportation systems are what most people think are the basis of the city, and that is not true. Transportation is a consequence of the ecology and commerce of the city. It is not the driver. And most people working in cities think that transportation is number one. No, it's number 3 or number 4 or number 5. Human systems and nature are the foundation of cities, especially if we want them to be sustainable. So we at Civitas, we're called Civitas, by the way, which is the Latin word for city. We like to say we're not suburbitas. We're about the real city. We build cities from nature up and culture down. So which kind of city should we build? This is a very complicated system. This is another very complicated system. But this is not the answer, to have one next to the other. Somehow we have to find a way of integrating these two things together. And now I'll start to show you projects where every project we are trying to integrate culture and nature together to make a healthier, more sustainable city. Now, there are probably 3 or 4 projects here, if you've heard me talk before, that you will recognize, but there are several that you will not recognize. Am I talking too fast? It's okay? So this is Denver, where I've lived for 35 years. We have 2 rivers. The mountains are over here. If you look, you can see this is smoke, because the industry follows the river, because the railroad follows the river, because it's easy grades. So right at that very point, the first settlement, the railroad comes and it's taking advantage of the ecological structure. Here was where the ships stopped, the barges really that came on the river, and the train stopped here. And here is the state capitol, just like Boston. And this is Main Street, called 16th Street, that connects the two. This is what the train yard looked like in 1960. And here, if you look carefully, there's our little river. I like to say it's like a little crack in the middle of the city. But look at all these trains. And here's the train station. That's very important. There is the train station. This is what I found when I was engaged by the mayor of Denver in 1988 to ask the question, could this railroad yard, so here's the river, here's the train station right here, could this railroad yard be a way to expand our city? And why expand our city? Because we wanted to have new people living near downtown. Because in America, there's been a long progression of city building, but by the 80s, the downtowns of most cities were failing because the suburbs had taken the economic energy away. And we were looking for new ways to bring people into the downtown of every American city, hoping that new residents would bring new money, new life, new culture, and a much healthier social system. So this was the mess that I was given. We started drawing different ideas of, and sorry, this is before computers, everything by myself, just like this. We had an idea, maybe we make a park. Here's the train station, and connect those two together and extend a little bit of the grid of the city. And this is what it looked like once the trains left. And you can see, train station. And we made this drawing. This drawing is very big. It's about 1.5 by 4 meters. Big drawing. And all it suggests is train station, connect to park, connect to river, with a grid of development. We also reminded people that the city began here and the center of politics was here, and that this line was an important connection. We took the river itself and we actually rebuilt the river, about 3 kilometers of the river, rebuilt the entire bottom of the river to protect it because it was it was failing. We moved the trains, just 2 tracks down the middle of the valley. All the other trains left. Again, the station, there's the train station right there. It's almost the same picture you saw before. It was empty. Then we started building connections. We designed 3 bridges for pedestrians and bikes that connect the city together. And here it is from last year. So here's the river. This is the other river. Here's the park that we made. And this is all the new development that's taken place since 1988 when we began. Here's one of our bridges. And these sites now are complete. This entire neighborhood is now done. About 6,000 residents live here today. And I would say about, probably it's about 5 million square feet. I can't immediately convert that into square meters, but it's a lot of growth. So one of the things we did is we did a master plan for the train station. And something that's probably coming to the Czech Republic, it's not here yet, is that we cannot do anything in the United States without engaging many stakeholders, many groups from the public, and anybody that wants to come. So when we were given the assignment of doing the new master plan just for the station, which included the tracks, how do we bring trains, trams, buses, taxis, cars, bikes, and pedestrians all together in this station? That was the question. We were given a task force, a committee to work with. It was 91 people. So we met once a month for 3 years with 91 people every month. So these are very complicated projects from a political point of view. But what you see here is a limited number of trains here. These are the trains that go across the country, passenger trains. We moved the freight trains. The freight trains were here. They moved sort of over here. This is our tram system and a bus tunnel. There's buses underneath that connect these two together. And so here you can see, this is a drawing, but it's now all built. The train station, so the buses were underground because we were having too much trouble with too many things on the surface creating a problem. So we finally decided to put the buses below. And the station has become the new center of our city. It's really interesting because it doesn't have very many trains today, maybe only 5 or 6 trains every day. But it is the center of the city, and you can see the new development happening behind. And the inside has been turned into a fabulous hall of restaurants, hotels, and food. And this is the park that started it. So, with that project, I learned how to deal with these very complicated things. Remember, there's law, there's politics, there's economics that all have to be solved. All those things have to somehow come together to make these things happen. So I was asked by the mayor to lead a group of people to figure out what to do with our airport, because we built a new airport and we were closing our old airport, which is called Stapleton. It's 4,200 acres. That's maybe 2,200 hectares to give you a sense, so really big. It had, in 1988, I was asked to start work. I am still working on it. So I have been working on this one project for 30 years. And I'm on my 4th mayor, still working on the same project. And so every new mayor, I have to tell them the history because they don't know it. But we began a public-private planning partnership in 1992. A wealthy man came forward he believed that if the city did the planning for the closed airport, they would make a mess of it. And so he stepped up, he created a foundation, he gave the foundation money that hired us to start working on a plan to find the best use of the property. I began negotiating with the Federal Aviation Authority, so with the airline people in 1992, and we got a decision by 1995 that we would redevelop. I could speak for the next 10 hours just on this one project, so I now speed up. So you can see it's only 5 miles from downtown. I'm not going to read all this, but this is what I have done. I was a participant in a citizens task force, the author of the first plan, advisor on the Stapleton redevelopment plan, co-author of the development plan. I led all the rezoning. I formed a new governance organization, a new public not-for-profit corporation whose members are appointed by the mayor, and I was appointed by the mayor to lead this organization. Then the organization started to have trouble, so then I was taken off of the organization by the mayor to do an audit, and we found many problems inside the organization. So we took the organization apart, and then I was asked to lead the selection of a developer. I also led the negotiating team. Then we wrote design review, structure, and guidelines. Since 1988, I chaired design review, and since 2002, we are also designing all the parks, which is actually 500 hectares of new parks. So imagine 30 years on one project. But the reason that we have become global in our reach is this one project taught us everything about real estate negotiations, about real estate finance, about all the different issues with taxes, all the issues with the law and the politics and the infrastructure, and so on and so forth. But we began with nature. And what we found is that here's the airport. We had a problem with the stormwater. So we created a plan that would hold the stormwater on the site. So when the rain comes, it fills with water. And we use that as the backbone of a new system of open space. So we used the ecology. We created a new ecology as the basis of city building. So here is what the site looks like. You can see the comparison. I mean, complete transformation. Just for reference, the control tower is right here. You will see that again. We decided that we needed to move the water across the surface. It's much more sustainable than putting the water in pipes. So we built these corridors. And these corridors now, you can see the water is happening right here. But we built this neighborhood intentionally, very low density. The big idea here was that Denver is a core city. At this time was only 400,000 people. Today, Denver is 700,000 people. And the metropolitan area is 3 million people. But the problem was that the core city, especially in the United States, people would move to the suburbs. So the people who were making the money, who had the young children, who had the good educations, they moved to the suburbs, leaving the people in the core of the city who were much more poverty, much more social problems, much more health problems in the core city. So the objective of this project was to bring people back into the city. And the way we could do that was we had to give them the kind of houses that they could get in the suburbs. It's sort of a trick, like a magic trick. Here is the tower. You'll see that one more time. But one thing we did is it's full of different kinds of housing products. So each of these are different types of housing, trying to attract different kinds of people at different ages, different levels of income, different family sizes, etc. It has been very successful at mixing people. And I believe a sustainable city depends on mixing people more than on mixing uses. This little creek was a pipe. It was a 1-meter pipe underneath the runway. You're looking at a runway. Airport runway turned into habitat. We are now working on extending this open space system about 300 more hectares. And these are just in fact, this is under construction right now. This is stormwater pathway. And so I'm not going to talk about these, but we negotiated what I call a public deal. What are the responsibilities of each of the public organizations? A deal for the Stapleton Development Corporation. This is the corporation that we established, the not-for-profit, and this is how it was financed. And then we brought in a developer as a partner, and we have a number of points in the deal with the developer also. So we brought 3 entities together. And I'm sitting in the Stapleton Development Corporation with the developer on one side and the city on the other side, and we manage the relationship between those two things as the site develops. So I think I've already shown somehow these are in here twice. But there's the tower. The tower is now a a really fun adult playground. It's got bowling, all sorts of activities take place here as the center of the community.
I like the idea of it being a flowing experience, more of a little bit of a tour. Is my mic on? It is. See, I'm trying to think about the camera angle. Hop on your bike, we're rolling. Here we are in East Village in Calgary. This is one of the most exciting urban redevelopments I've seen. We're building new streets, new apartments, a new library, a new performing arts center, and we've been involved in making the public places. Nothing like a beautiful morning ride. And there's nothing I'd rather do than ride a bike like this. You really feel like you're part of the landscape, and you can also ignore traffic rules. Try not to crash. It's about 8 or 9 degrees, crispy. Everybody's looking, wondering, why has he got that funny camera on his bike? This forest is probably about 60 years old and is a result of the last major flood. These cottonwoods only reseed effectively after a flood. There's so many stories like that that we want people to know. We looked at old photographs and we found that 80 years ago, there used to be what we call a breach across the island. We recreated that breach and actually created a new channel for the river that cuts right across the middle of the island. So here's a little feature we call the transect. This is about 600 feet long and it cuts right across the island. And we're about to cross something we call the lowland channel. This is something we created. In another year, it'll be a wetland. We created little islands for songbirds. But it's really a way to experience the island in a whole different way. We've got a little plaza space, amphitheater, places for school groups. We've already seen one school group sitting right here out just talking about the restoration of the island. Everything about this island is accessible, which is something we just believe is very, very important. One of the ideas that we had is how can we make this island feel safe? So you can always see ahead. Oh, here's Claire. Hey, Claire. So we have public bathrooms, some interpretation, give you the history of the island and where this project came from. We might get stuck in the muck. Yep, we're in the muck. There's a large hill in front of us we call the Rise. When we dug out the breach or the new channel, we had this extra soil, and so we made this hill. So you can get up on top of this hill and look back at the river in downtown, and people downtown can see you. This is a special place to come, interesting place to be. People told us it wouldn't be possible to get a permit, do such massive construction, to cut a new river through an island and to make a big hill in the middle of the floodplain. But we were able to do that because there's so much restoration that we're doing here. It takes a team of different kinds of minds to design something like this. And the design ideas come from everyone. They come from that entire team, not just from 1 or 2 designers. I think that the reason the island is already successful is that the design is based on some really truthful things about this place.
So that's just kind of fun to watch the movie. But it's a very, very important project because we not only restored the island. Here you can see the breach is right here where we cut through the island. It's been unbelievably successful in terms of bringing new people into the city and giving health back to nature. And it came about because at the interview to get selected for this, the mayor said, I want a beach. Can we have a beach? But of course, the river is very dangerous. I used to be a whitewater kayaker, so I understand how water works. And what we did is, using that knowledge, we cut away so the water enters here, so the water is always going very slow, so it's very safe. And then we made this crazy hill, which was very difficult to get approved because it's in the floodway. But we got it approved and built. And it's, this is what they call the white dinner. A lot of fun. So, Calgary liked us. So then we got hired by somebody called the Calgary Stampede, which is a crazy thing. This is a big organization. It's, I could talk a long time about these people, but they have probably the best relationship of any white organization with the native people of Canada, because they have a very old relationship of bringing white people and native people together for celebration. And they have this every year. This is the chuck wagon races, amazingly scary and dangerous. And therefore, 3 million people come to watch it. Also on the site are the Calgary Flames National Hockey League Club. And our job is to, number one, this is the Stampede grounds, the Elbow River. This is the Saddle Dome where the National Hockey League plays. They need to expand. They need a new arena. And we need to find a way to help all of this land become a better part of the city. So again, we found a hole or a missing piece in the city, and how can we fill that hole? And I won't go too far to describe the plan, but first we're building a new transit line. Second, all new streets. Third, a new system of parks and open spaces. Then an urban pattern to align the streets with buildings, putting that into context, studying the densities and heights. So this would be the new arena. The existing arena sits right here, so the hockey team goes here. And just, these are very early models, very crude, but shows you where we're at in the planning process, looking at 7.4 million square feet of new development. So we do that kind of work. Now here's something else, entirely different. The North Embarcadero in San Diego looked like this. It's a working waterfront, big cruise ships. There's aircraft carrier right here. This building right here was the headquarters of the United States Navy in World War II. And this is the second biggest naval base in the United States. But you can see it is not a very friendly place for people. So we created a vision. This is very complicated. Our client is jointly the city, a redevelopment authority, and the port and the Navy. So 4 parts to the client. We have to make them all satisfied. We have to relocate the Navy ships, make room for the cruise ships, and so on. Plus build all new streets. So new streets, this is all new development. In fact, this building had a groundbreaking on this building last week. This building and this building were finished last year, and the waterfront and street were finished 2 years ago. So we built it. What we did is we moved the street over. We made a public esplanade 107 feet wide. And this beautiful street with these fun custom street lights that we designed just to create a signature. And we worked with an artist to design these pavilions. And this is a sustainability feature. This is a trench that takes the urban water. It's 1,000 feet long. And it takes the urban water and cleans the water before the water goes in the bay. Just nighttime. And then I think I have a little movie here, just so you get a better sense. Sometimes the video helps you understand it. So this is not a special day. This is just a Saturday afternoon last September. In case you think this was easy, we accomplished this project. It took 7 years. We were was subjected to 5 lawsuits, people trying to stop the project, mostly because they wanted something else or they didn't want the public money spent. So we had to go through 5 lawsuits, but ultimately we survived the lawsuits and were able to get this built. Many sustainable things. So this is where the water is. This line is what we call the water quality. The pavers are made locally. We custom design the pavers using local materials. All of the furnishings, the bollards, everything was built by local craftspeople. So we designed it all and worked with the local crafts community because that's more sustainable. This is a cruise ship terminal. This also, I won't get too technical here, but we have to protect the cruise ship during Military Defensive Condition 3, DEFCON 3, which means that we cannot have any vehicle within 300 feet of any part of the ship. So we actually had to learn we move the ships out on the pier 300 feet, and it was highly, highly technical and a lot of work. But you can see how it works. It's just a comfortable place that people like to be. There's no special programming. It's just beautiful and comfortable, and people have hugs. And then we have this fun, like that's backwards, but when you look down, you can see it projects the sun. It says ladybug. That says sky, and that's just for fun. Stepan mentioned the LA River. This is something I've worked on I have many projects I work on more than 10 years. This river is 51 miles long in Los Angeles. Once Los Angeles looked like this. Today it looks like this. Los Angeles is a really cool, interesting city. You just have to like traffic. It is probably, without any question, it's the most eclectic, creative, and culturally diverse city in North America. Anything goes in Los Angeles. So we held 19 public meetings. I had as many as 600 people come to a single public meeting. And you have to talk to all of them. It's really difficult. But you can see what the river had done. The river was very damaging. Look at how the city doesn't get close to the river. So the Army Corps of Engineers fixed it by building walls. Now, the reason I put this in here is one of the things we're doing in Brno is working with many organizations. And this is the most complicated project I have worked on because of this. The river is a right-of-way, just like a street is a right-of-way. And the county, this county of Los Angeles, owns the concrete. The land is private land. So the river flows across people's private land. The county just owns the concrete. The city owns the water. So just the water, not the concrete, just the water. But the Army Corps of Engineers controls all the rules. So it's a real mess. And so different groups, they maintain different parts. So here's the private ownership. So these are the people that own the river. And so you have this, all of these people have to be involved. These are the primary 7 agencies that are involved in making any change to the river itself. And I personally wrote a report of 132 pages long, just analyzing all of the different potential governance alternatives to transform this river, because it's easy to design the river. It's hard to change the river because the government is such a problem. So we created 3 forms of new government. First, a joint powers authority, which is an organization under state legislation that combines the Army Corps of Engineers, the county and the city into one entity to control the river. So now they are all together. And this all happened, by the way. We didn't just recommend it. This has happened. Then a revitalization corporation, a for-profit development company, and then a foundation to help with supplemental fundraising. So extremely complex. But this is the benefit. Here is what the river looks in the upper stream today. And here is right in the center of downtown. You can have this. This works from an engineering perspective, no problem. Obviously, it's more sustainable. The river is healthier. It's accessible for recreation. And it now, the Army Corps of Engineers recently approved a $9 billion project to start building this. So lots of pictures. So only a couple more things. I'm almost done. I hope you don't fall asleep on me. In Tampa, I just put this in because we opened a new project last week in the city of Tampa, which is Florida. So here you see the city of Tampa. There's downtown. The site is right here or right there. And here, however, you can see the site in 1960 was the center of Black Tampa, called Robert City, the African-American city. And one of the many horrible things that have happened in the United States, urban renewal went in to clear the slums. So you can see what urban renewal did. They built a freeway, and they removed the heart of the black city. This is absolutely racist. They removed the heart of the black city, and they made a park. And of course, the black people wanted the city, not the park. This park became a terrible place. Many, many problems of racial oppression by the police, lots of problems with gang, murders, you name it, all happened. So we were selected 5 years ago to remove this park and make a park that would work for the black people in the neighborhood. And everybody. But so I began this project. I personally did 45 one-on-one interviews in kitchens in the black community to build trust, to understand. So I heard all sorts of stories. And then we started public meetings once we had built this trust to rebuild a sense of community. We would have as many as 300 people come to the meetings, and we spent hours at tables with these people, understanding how we could somehow give something, create something that would strengthen their community and not weaken their community. So the idea is very complicated. First, it turned out there was nowhere in the city, it's a waterfront city, but there's nowhere that you can legally put a boat in the water without paying. So we create a new boathouse that the city operates that has canoes, kayaks, paddleboards, dragon boats, and crew racing boats, so sculls, and about 150 boats with a new community center on top for the neighborhood. Then we took the seawall and we cut the seawall back and built a floating dock. And the reason we did that is there are boats here, so that this creates a protected sheet of water which is calm. So if you've never been on a paddleboard before or in a kayak before, the waves, you can't take it. So this makes it very calm. Then there is a great lawn. The community absolutely wanted a large area for picnics. To our surprise, they wanted tennis, basketball, more basketball, football, a giant playground. And so here are some renderings that we did. These are about 4 years old. And we opened it last weekend. And so here's the great lawn. Here is the boathouse. It's just crazy, full of boats. This is the river promenade. Looks just like the rendering. And then we had a concert that night. Had 35,000 people came to the opening. So we were really proud of this. And so there you see the little dock that protects from the waves. And a big success. So, the last thing, Brno. We are working, here is the central city in Brno, and the train station is right here, and there's a large area of open land, and we are working with COM, which is the planning agency, with an urban strategies company here in Prague called 4CT, working on the strategy of how you pull this together. Also with the Brno architects Burjan and Červinka, really great architects. And this is a very interesting collaboration of our clients, 4CT, Burjan Červinka, Civitas, and calm, plus staff from the city. So I had a meeting with about 20 city staff yesterday, and the project is moving in a very positive direction. So what we're looking at is different scales of sites. So here you can really see the city. Here is the train station. You can see how open this land is, and the river is here. So if you think back to what I talked about, the project I did in Denver, it's the same project. It's exactly the same project. So this is what it looks like. Imagine you are less than 1 kilometer from the center of the city, and you have nothing but open land. A tremendous opportunity for the city to attract new people, young people, new businesses, innovators, etc., to make this city grow in a very healthy way. And here you see it from Google. So there's the train station. The cathedral is here. Interestingly, there's another train station right here. This is mostly freight. This is passenger. So if you take the train from Prague, you get off right here today. But look at all this open land next to the river. So one of the things, if you ever go there, I'm sure most of you have been, is the train station. The front of the train station is here. And here's the actual station here. Here's how you walk into the city. Everything else is the back. This line right here is a wall. This wall is 7 meters high and about 2 kilometers long. So front, back, front, back. Very simple. There's one more problem. You cannot walk from here to here very easily. You can walk right here. You can get out right there. You can drive a car in here. It's very isolated. So here is a plan. So existing train station. Look at all the tracks. So you can see how the river, how this zone is isolated by the railroads and the river. And the question is, how could we open this up? So for many years, the city has been debating whether the train station should move. And this is almost funny, but the plan for Brno in 1926, City Council approved the plan in 1926, says move the train station. True. So station is here. 1926, move the train station. 4 more plans, move the train station. And now 2 months ago, the City Council also voted to move the train station yet again. So our job with our team is to see what is possible if, in fact, the train station moves. So today you have a ring of open space, parks, and institutions around the old city, but a barrier where the train comes through. Our big idea is to move the train and make a corridor of green with a new park. So here's Lujenki Park here. This is about a kilometer and a half around the center of the city. Imagine if we make a new park here that's connected back, how we can influence this part of the city the same way. So we can really extend the energy of the river much deeper. And of course, as you can see, if you land use patterns, this is really the industrial part of the city. So the basic idea is simple. New train station, a new boulevard connected with a series of plazas that connect you to the city, and green space to a green park. So the idea, again, a very green plan. I'm only showing you this to show there's a lot of work that's been done. So we have floor plans for all these buildings, a lot of study of what's the market, what's the mix of people, what's the mix of units, what's the mix of business, etc. And just a few renderings of a core plaza within a residential piece of the neighborhood, what a street might look like, emphasizing having a diversity of building types, but contemporary buildings that still refer to the history of Brno, but are new living and working environments, projected street scene. And then one thing at the end, just a minute and a half, a little movie that we made. So there's the cathedral. So if I'm leaving the train station, the new station, I'm looking right at the cathedral, coming down a new boulevard. to a new plaza. There's an historic building called the America Building here, and an old viaduct. Then to where the street pivots to make a new central plaza as a gateway to connect the new part of the city to the old. The train station with a park behind. And that park, train station here, looking back to the central plaza here. And then looking down the corridor where the trains are today, that's the America Building. And this we call the High Line, this arch which is there, to expose the arch and make it a special place for pedestrians. To renovate the America Building, to have sports fields, a school, a major amphitheater, and then a new riverfront park, which expands flood storage for the city. New flood protection with a levee. So this is a new levee to protect the city from flooding, which becomes a promenade, and now you can see the connection of the new park, the new city back into the old. So that is the end of my presentation. I apologize for talking so long. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for a fascinating presentation. Maybe before we open the floor to the public, quick question. You've done a lot of amazing work in Brno. I wonder have you heard any feedback from the public yet? I mean, we're grumpy people. We're easy to we criticize a lot. We don't praise enough. So have you had any initial feedback from Brno?
We have been working in this interesting partnership with the city and COM for 6 months. So we've had a series of workshops, and this plan is the result of those workshops. And so we've been working through transportation, bikes, pedestrians, parks, infrastructure, land use, all the different parts, and have just come to this point. So it has not been taken up, we have an expression, we haven't taken it for a walk yet. And so tonight is the first time out the kitchen door to show you the walk. But I can tell you this, we have very positive feelings from city staff on this.
When is it expected to be finished? I mean, what's the roadmap like?
Let me look at my watch.
Yeah, of course.
It should be really soon.
You've been working on Denver for 30 years, so are you going to be in Brno for another 30 years? Or
this will take many years, of course. It will take many years, and it will be very complicated. Like my other projects, there will be complicated steps, and a lot of discussion. There will be public debate. There's a need for many different kinds of negotiation and lots of technical studies too. So I wouldn't project the timeline. Certainly, at least a decade or more.
Be one last question before I give the microphone to the public. You've been coming here for a while now to the Czech Republic. Have you noticed a change maybe in not just the physical appearance of the city maybe, but also maybe the approach of the public or of the
Well,
planners?
the biggest change I've noticed is I'm a vegetarian, and there's more food I can eat now.
That's true.
I'm always just getting the soup. Now it's a little better. I don't know. I sense that I think a very important step is the release of the new metropolitan plan, and as you know, I've been here to IPR several times, talking with people with Roman Kautsky and others about the plan, and so I feel very good that the plan is now released and it's out, and there's public debate that will take place about that, because what I learned along the review that I did in the process or progress of the plan is it's a very sound technical document that needs to be, it needs the public debate, but that I think will make a big difference. But I think in Brno it's an interesting city, because one way to look at Brno is that it's kind of just over there. You can see it from Vienna, you can see it from Prague, but in fact, I think the opportunity is tremendous there because it doesn't have the, I don't know what word to use to, it doesn't have the same kind of history and the same kind of pressures and influences that Vienna or Prague have. And so I think if Brno takes a progressive point of view, the opportunity is tremendous, that they could actually grow quite quickly. So I think probably some corners are being turned.
Well, thank you. Any question from the public? I have this throwing microphone.
Wow.
You can throw yourself if you want.
No, it's okay. I need one of those slingshots like at the soccer game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Microphone would be better.
That's a microphone.
Okay.
Please
It's not a joke.
Speak into the cube.
How does it work?
It works.
I have no idea.
What do you think about the decision to move the train station? Because
Good
often
question.
people say, that's the argument, that you enter directly in the city center.
Sure.
That's advantage of railway.
Sure.
Yeah, so just that. And maybe the proposal of the unit architects
Yes.
who won the competition is still somehow in
They won
play?
the first competition.
Okay.
There were two competitions. Professor Kolicek won the second competition.
Okay. So maybe if you would say also something about these proposals.
I have, for COM, I did an analysis of all 61 competition entries. And so there were two competitions. The first one had 54 entries, and yes, UNIT won the first one. And the second was invited to 7 different teams, and Professor Kolicek and his team won the second one. And I learned a huge amount. Now, I will say, I really appreciate the question, because when I first was called, I'm not exactly sure why I got called, but I know that Mikhail Sedlacek had seen me lecture a couple of times, and so I knew him already. Of course, he now is heading COM, so I think that had a lot to do with it. But when he said we want to move the train station, I had been to the train. I'd been to Brno 3 years ago, but I went crazy, right? Move the train station? It sounds crazy. And yet, I will tell you, the competitions were extremely important in helping me understand the problem. Because I don't want to sound arrogant here, but of all 61 entries, there were very few that were really plausible urban plans for the district. Very few. It was fascinating. Most of the plans in the first competition increased the barrier created by the train station. And so as we have done a lot of analysis in the last 6 months on this issue, and as hard as it is for me to believe myself saying it, in fact, I think moving the train station is exactly what needs to happen. Now, just to give you a sense of scale, many people in Brno will say, oh, it's much too far. And downtown merchants will say, oh, it will hurt business because the tourists will be too far away. But of course, as you know, there's a shopping mall right behind the existing train station. And number one, if it's not the train station that would hurt business, the shopping mall is what would hurt the business downtown. So that's a problem is already there. But the distance from the new train to the central plaza in Brno is exactly the same as the distance from Wenceslas Square to the main station in Prague. So that is the scale. It is exactly the same distance, and because I have measured it. So that tells me, well, it's actually not too far, right? It's not too far. The problem is there's nothing there. So when you look at it today, it's like, where? It's way too far away. It's not too far away. But it absolutely depends on having an intelligent plan and the right people involved, the partnerships necessary to make that connection work. And then the opportunity that's presented by moving the old tracks is phenomenal. I mean, Brno could, if you could create this, I mean, people will come from across Europe to see it, because it is, how often in Europe do you have an opportunity to make such a dramatic transformation to a city and show that the city is actually interested in the future? So it's a long answer, I'm sorry, but over time I became to agree that moving the station is probably It's difficult, but the best thing.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Is someone over here?
Oh, where?
Okay, thank you. I have a question about your design process.
Yes.
When observing discussions among American planning and design professionals, it seems like that quite a lot of time is wasted on maybe purely academic discussions between new urbanism and landscape urbanism. And seems like that your work is quite able to strike a compromise between these two, that you get both the large park and the urban density. Yeah. And I was wondering if this is a conscious decision or if it's a the ultimate road to success, that you're able to satisfy both sides of this argument.
Yeah, when I teach at Harvard from time to time, and every time I start a new class at Harvard, I tell the new students the same thing. I say, if any one of you calls me a new urbanist, or if anyone calls me a landscape urbanist, immediate flunk. Out. Because I've, for my entire career, have rejected these simplistic labels. And I've especially, even though I teach at Harvard, I have especially rejected the use of rhetoric to cover the use of the actual substance. And so this is a little bit why I talked about civitas and our culture at the start. We do not accept assumptions. It doesn't matter who our client is. It doesn't matter who the mayor is. Somebody says, oh, you must do this. And we go, thank you. And then we go, not sure. Because we depend on challenging assumptions and trying to get to the bottom through history, this whole idea of ecological structure and how culture and technology and economy work upon an ecological structure. Without going too further into that, all I have to do is look at the Central Platte Valley in Denver or the Stapleton Airport in Denver and say, in fact, in 30 years, we have added about 50,000 residents into the city and businesses because we take a deep dive into what really is truthful, and we avoid the process and the rhetoric of the people who are trying to get attention. The people who talk about new urbanism and landscape urbanism are trying to get attention to themselves. They're trying to make their brand, right? And we are very anti-brand, and we just think you have to work harder. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. There's a question up there.
Hello.
Hello.
So weird.
It's very funny.
So it was really impressive work and
Thank you.
Very complex and super cool, and seems Brno is very lucky to have you there. The question is, you probably know that the Czech Republic, there is just two major cities, like magnet for people, and so to make it this really nice and interesting project in Brno, so it will be definitely going to be a really good competition and serious for Prague. And it's also going to attract more people from other smaller cities in Czech Republic. And you probably know there is a kind of not really good situation about the population from this smaller city, even though they're really good environment and comfortable and stuff, but people, especially young one, goes to the job, to university, mainly to Brno and Prague.
Yep.
And the question is if there is, because you said you had this debate with the authorities and stakeholders, if those consider this situation that those small city around Brno or even like further will be depopulated more, and if so, if there's some kind of plan B for that, maybe some regional development, some kind of connection with the smaller city and make this infrastructure more easier reachable from like smaller village, and to make it this kind of Eastern or Western European style, like in Germany.
Well, first, no, we are not debating that in Brno now. But yes, I fully understand the question and the issue. That issue is I can't say this for certain, but I believe it would be true that that issue is a much bigger issue in America than it is anywhere in Europe. Because America, and this is why we have Donald Trump, because the small towns across America have been losing people and losing their economy for a long, long time. And those people feel left out. They feel that the cities are the enemy, and that's what Trump is preying upon. He's talking to those people. He's not talking to the people in the cities. He's talking to all those other people. And so the divide that you see in America, we just call it the rural-urban divide. It's also a wealthy-poor divide, is a huge problem. Now, I've been working with Volkswagen. Because of Dieselgate, Volkswagen has set up something, two places in the world, called the Volkswagen Futures Center. One is in Fort Simon, the other one is in San Jose, California. And I've been working with Volkswagen in San Jose on the issues of carbon, urban settlement, urban pattern, and urban-rural mobility. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that it is fascinating as soon as you take any question that involves sustainability or resiliency and social policy or social justice, you encounter a deep level of complexity. So while we have technology today that allows people to live in beautiful small villages but work in the city, or maybe they work in Prague 2 days a week and they work from some small village for the rest of the time, it's a lifestyle choice that's only available to the wealthy, educated people. And for the other people in those villages who don't have that opportunity, that education, or that level of income, it's bringing gentrification home to the small village. A very weird problem. The same problem we have in the core city, where one of the issues of my projects is gentrification, because we end up spending money, and on one hand the city gets stronger and stronger, but other people aren't included. I think that there has to, but one more important thing to think about is that any city of maybe more than 1 million people or so right now is competing on a global scale. And while the villages have a problem, the cities of 500,000 people probably have a bigger problem, because they cannot attract the people or the businesses. And so there's a really interesting issue between energy and carbon, social equity, and the location of people, and how all of that gets connected together that nobody understands. But that's why we've attached ourselves to Volkswagen, because we want to learn about it. Generally speaking, though, I think it is going to require national policy in every country to make a difference on that question. Complicated problem, complicated answer. Yes?
There's a follow-up.
Another question about Denver, your city that you're also designed. So you said that, I didn't remember exactly, I think it was, you said that was the 6,000 new residents,
yes,
and you developed area in the center, downtown. Mm-hmm. So the question is, who are the people who are gonna reside there from downtown? Sure. If there is a people who from suburb, and if those, so does it mean that it's gonna be crisis again, like problem with abandoned suburbs, or if it's not those suburbs residents, so how you attract those people from other side of Denver?
Okay, so if you take the two Denver projects, Stapleton and the central city. The central city is heavily attracting young people and old people, and not families. So it's attracting people who are moving because they are making a lifestyle choice, that they want to be close to the restaurants and the amenities and the recreation and the culture that's downtown. Of course, they have the economic means to make that move. People moving to Stapleton, all families, because Stapleton is designed to try and bring the families into the city. So just in one city, we have 30,000 people in families and 6,000 people in singles and couples. So very, very different. What I learned from that is that, in fact, you can design a city to attract the people you want, because we had two different motivations and we attracted two different populations. The the larger question of suburbanization is a huge debate in the US. And on a simple level, my only answer is to make the cities healthier and more mixed. That's what I can do, is try and make the city attract more people. Now, maybe it hurts the village, but the real dynamic is I'm trying to make this not overly complicated. I still think that even though our cities are growing at the fastest rate, so the United States right now is 53% urban population, but which is a big shift from in my career. But I still think the real problem in America in urban development is that the medium-sized cities will attract people the fastest. Cities like Rockford, Illinois, or Des Moines, Iowa, or even Sacramento, California, the smaller cities, if the smaller cities build parks, build schools, have a symphony, have performance hall, have museums, they will attract people much faster than the big cities for one reason: they're cheaper and safer. And it's been proven to me now that with electric cars and AVs coming, I believe that the anti-urbanization of America will continue at a faster pace because it's cheaper, safer, easier, and less stressful to live in a small city that grows quickly than to come into the big city. And people like Elon Musk are facilitating that by making the mobility so much cheaper. I was in a think tank last year with some people from the Urban Land Institute and the head engineer at Toyota from Tokyo. And I made the same argument that I just made. And one of the other guys in the think tank said, no, the cost of energy, the cost of gas will be too much. People will not move to those cities because it'll be too expensive. And the guy from Toyota said, oh no, within 20 years, we will have batteries that hold so much power. Your energy for your vehicle will be basically free. Basically, it'll be free. The cost of energy will never deter this rapid expansion, which again sends me back to our research with Volkswagen, trying to understand this problem more. But yeah, that's why I'm not president. I make it too complicated.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sure, we can pass the microphone along.
Talking about these EVs and stuff, I have a question considering the autonomous traffic, like driverless cars. What it will bring from your perspective to the urban planning, because there are already many studies, like it will remove 70% of all parking spaces and all these things. Is it right to plan already these parts for these new means of transport, let's say?
One thing that history proves is that cities change every few generations with major changes in technology. So if you have the ecological structure, a culture, and back to the Bruegel painting, that technology was a horse and a shovel and a wheel. That was technology. So everything is close together. Today we have crazy technology, and now AVs are just another kind. The city will still exist. People will still want that connectivity. They will find all forms of mobility, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It will not fundamentally change the city. But one of the things, a real revelation, came in recent dialogues with Volkswagen. There are lots of articles today, which I call fantasy articles, about AVs. There'll be no cars on the street. Wilshire Boulevard, there's one recent one that said Wilshire Boulevard, which is a massive street in Los Angeles, today only carries 36,000 vehicles per day because it's full of traffic. But with AVs and special lanes for AVs, it will carry 90,000 vehicles a day. Now they say that that's a good thing. I also think it's baloney. Because with Volkswagen, we came upon something really interesting. Volkswagen has done an analysis of urban populations and age and movement of people in the United States. And they believe the highest demand for mobility, the most rapidly growing and the highest demand in America is for people who are getting old in their own homes, who refuse to move into a retirement community or some other facility. Because now with all the technology, you can live longer, but you can live longer in a remote location if you just have somebody who will help you, because technology does so much for you. And even my own son is working with IKEA developing products that detect falls. So if you fall in your apartment, the computer will know it and call for help immediately. You don't have to do anything. And so technology changes the expectation, but always in a way that hard for us to predict. And where I'm going with this is, we realized with Volkswagen that if the highest need for mobility are lots of people aging in place in lots of remote areas, we will not have autonomous vehicle lanes going to every house, right? What does that tell you? It means that the AV must drive in mixed traffic. It must. It means that the idea of separate lanes for AVs will only happen in the densest part of the city. It will not be the general form of mobility. That the AV will have to be with every car, which means that every car will have to be capable as an AV. So AVs will not be black or white. Every AV, you could get in, drive it yourself, or in certain zones, it can drive itself. And what that means, if you then go to, I have a friend named Robin Chase, she's the founder of Zipcar. She's really articulate about this. The whole idea of Zipcar, and then Uber is based on what they learned from Zipcar, is the idea of how do we utilize excess capacity. So if I have a car, and I drive to the office and it sits in the parking lot, and then I drive home and it sits on the street or in the garage, 90% of the time, the car has excess capacity. Somebody else could use this car because it's just sitting there. So that is what AVs will fulfill is, and what does that mean? It means there'll be no reason for an AV, nobody will want to park an AV, but the AV will always want to be moving. So what's likely is that AVs will be distributed on every street with much higher levels of congestion than we have today. Not less traffic, much more traffic, but we won't need parking so much. And because there's no value in an AV that's parked. So it will continue to move. That then, there are new studies suggesting a really interesting problem. Because I have a whole other lecture on public health and how the design of cities affects public health. There's no question at all. Today, I stay at the hotel downtown, so I take a taxi to get here. Let's say when I leave here tonight, I have some friends and I say, oh, let's get a beer. We might walk a little bit, go get a beer. We might walk a little bit more, get another beer, finally end up back in the hotel. But I can walk from here to Wenceslas Square in 20 minutes, 25 minutes, not very far. I will do it in an AV in the future. I will leave here, get in an AV, drive to the bar, get out, drive there. I believe there will be a dramatic negative impact on public health because people will stop walking. People will stop walking and they'll just use that stupid car. So I am not a fan of AVs. I think it's coming, but I think that people are too optimistic about what it means for the future. You heard it here first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think.
Ask another thing considering this. You said that the EV will be so cheap that it will support
Yes.
villages or smaller towns. What I somehow think is that because it's how to say it. You need a lot of people to make it work very efficient. So it will work the best in the city. And it will be still much, much more cheaper in the city always. So the difference, I think, will be still bigger and bigger. Or is it not correct?
Well, well, nobody knows what's correct. But the dialogue with Volkswagen is actually centered around, see, we're working with Volkswagen because we understand cities and they understand vehicles. Simple. But what they are really interested in is what is the future hierarchy of transportation systems and vehicles for optimum mobility over a region. So for example, an AV working in the heart of Prague will always stay within the heart of Prague. Nobody will take an AV. The AV that will take me from here to the hotel is not the same one that might take me to Brno. Because that one probably is not one person in one car. It's a different scale of some kind. And so the question that they are asking is, how many scales of vehicle, and who and how do you organize those different services so that just like today, if I take, like today, I go to Brno, I walk from the train, I get in a taxi, I go to Brno and Trevinka because they don't live near a bus or, I mean, their office is not near a bus or tram. So I have to take a taxi. But when I go somewhere else, I get on a tram, and maybe I get off the tram, I get on a bus, and then I walk a half a kilometer to get home, right? There's different scales of trip. So they are interested in what are those different systems and vehicles that will sort out those different scales of trips. And probably it's a new layer between today we have, let's say, regional rail, intercity rail. There's probably some other kind of vehicle that we don't have today that's filling the void between the intercity, because the smart AV car can do the little city. It can do it. Every little city can have the smart AV. Everybody can take the train and take that. But what about the places in between? That's probably a new kind of service and a new kind of vehicle. And they're modeling the optimization of these different possible routes. They're also really fun, by the way. If you go to their office, they have a GTI, fully automated, and you can call the GTI in the building. In the first floor of the building, you can ask for coffee, and the GTI will bring you coffee. It drives through the building. It's electric. It's really fun.
All right, I think we have time for one last question from anyone here.
Who wants the bouncy ball?
Yeah. I think we're not very good at asking questions, and now with the throwing, it's even harder.
Yeah.
But anyway, one last question for me. How's your Czech? Is it getting better?
No.
All right. Thank you very much. Mark Johnson, everybody. Thank you.